Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. Today on the Develop Yourself podcast, I have two special guests with me, Vanessa and Wilfredo, two people that I've known from LinkedIn, and Vanessa, who I've met in real life, both self-taught developers who recently got their first roles in tech. I want to talk to them today about what it actually takes to break into tech and their route, which is really similar. They actually both met up and were discussing how they got into tech. And then Vanessa reached out to me and said, I think this would be a great podcast episode. And I totally agree. And I just want to share that I've been looking into like data engineering and getting away from software engineering a little bit as I see that data is becoming a thing that I just am really interested in exploring. And I'm feeling like, where do I even begin? Like, what do I do to become a hireable data engineer? Even though that's not my intention, really. I don't want to like switch careers totally. But I'm learning that like, where do you even start? And with all the information out there, it's actually harder to get started than I anticipated because there's so much conflicting information out there. And Vanessa and Wilfredo, you two have just made a transition into tech, probably feeling a lot of the same overwhelm that I felt. I'm hoping we can do like a bit of like a mental exercise here, like a reverse engineering type of exercise. So if the goal or one proven way to get into tech is to do some free work, how do people get to the point where they can do free work? Like you both somehow figured out, I'm going to learn X, Y, and Z. So one, how did you embark on this path? How did you say, here's what I'm going to learn? And how did you begin acquiring these skills?
So I didn't do any free work at the time. And if I had the opportunity, of course, I will do that because, again, that's going to be experience that is just going to serve me later on. But for me, it was just about researching different paths in tech. Believe it or not, my first language was Python because I wanted to become a data analyst. That was my draw to the field.
Okay.
And then I started doing some research at the very beginning, first few weeks, about other areas that I could explore that are in more high demand at the time. For me, was front-end development, specifically React here in the US. Honestly, just to give you an example, if I was living in Spain, Angular is pretty popular over there over React. At least the last survey that I read. So for me, it was just about the market. Like here, front-end development, React Native, it was a lot of demand for it. And then I decided to kind of go that route, knowing that in tech you can shift just like you're doing now with your new adventure, right? Like you can shift to other areas later on because after you know like the fundamentals of programming, it's kind of not easy, but it's more like a smooth process to pick new technologies. So for me was just that, like researching what I needed to do to get job ready, which areas in my market were more on demand at the time, and then just go with those technologies and start one day at a time.
I like that. I think the local market research is really important. And I'm curious, Vanessa, did you take a similar approach?
For me, I actually went in a different kind of direction in which I want to see what the coding boot camps were teaching. I mentioned that I studied a lot of the curriculum of the coding boot camps and see what was like the highest trend or what was taught. And I saw that React was being taught in almost all the boot camps. But I also took some pre-course work at the different boot camps. Like I tried Hackbright and also Hack Reactor. Yep. So one is Python and the other is like JavaScript, React. So I tried both and then decided to go with React, but I decided not to go through a coding boot camp at the end because I felt like, I can do this on my own. There's a lot of cheap resources. Yeah.
That was not an option for me because I think, Vanessa, you and I, we did this, the transition while working a full-time job. And going to boot camp or going back to college, it was not an option for me. So I had to put in the work by myself.
Yeah, I had to quit my full-time job because I felt like, my learning style, I need to put all of my mind and energy into it. So I quit my full-time job. But did part-time work. So I still couldn't do coding boot camp full time.
No, that's an important point that I think a lot of people, especially into adulthood, don't consider. It's like, do you really want to put all your eggs in one basket? And like, no one can guarantee the timeline to get hired. Like I own a coding program to teach people how to code, and I never tell people quit your job because I'm like, I don't know how long it's going to take you, or a life event happens or whatever. So how did you both, now that you both have decided on like the tech stack you're going to kind of learn, you've looked at curriculum at boot camps, or Wilfredo, you were looking at like the market and seeing, okay, here's the technologies in the market that I see are really popular. Then how do you go about actually like learning the stuff? Because you could go from tutorial to tutorial to tutorial, which is what I see a lot of people do. They say, I'm going to buy this course, then a 100-hour Udemy course, then this and that, and they don't really get anywhere. But you two did get somewhere. So how did you do that? Wilfredo, do you want to start? Like, what resources were you using?
So for me, I bought like a on-demand Udemy bootcamp for web development, but no frameworks, just straight CSS, HTML, pure JavaScript, just to kind of learn the fundamentals. And I started that actually after learning a little bit of each tech by themselves. So I started with HTML, CSS, and then JavaScript to put everything together. And I decided to purchase a course that was recommended to me on Udemy, and I completed that. It took me about 3 months to get all the projects done, and I learned I gained a lot of knowledge. It was really worth it. And then I was guilty for, let's say, about a month and a half. I was guilty myself of watching too many tutorials. Mm-hmm. And then I started just pushing myself to create stuff from scratch. I guess I'm a weirdo because I love CSS. So I was just trying to hack UIs, user interfaces with just vanilla CSS and learning as much as possible, which he helped me tremendously today because I can navigate kind of Tailwind or any styling approach that any team or company want me to work with. But for me, it was just a lot of support on that course. I bought a couple of courses, actually, even one in TypeScript later on. Watched hundreds of hours for free of free material on YouTube. And then it took me about a month and a half to 2 months to start building my own projects. And some of them I actually put it on my portfolio. And one of them actually was the one my company that I work for today used to interview me, to ask me questions about that project.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yes. So, I always tell people, and I do have coffee chats sometimes. I tell people that treat these projects as a business card, something that you're going to present to your potential employer. Because, I haven't been in the tech industry for too long, about almost to hit my 3-year mark. But I feel like success can come from different areas. You never know which one is going to be your area. Maybe a referral, maybe somebody saw your resume, maybe somebody just saw your project, or maybe you are just a friendly person on LinkedIn. Who knows? So, but when it comes to projects, I like to do my best, treat it like a business card, something that I'm going to present, and it's going to represent me as a developer. So I take it very seriously when it comes to those portfolio projects.
Man, that's interesting because I'll be honest, one of the things I generally tell people, and I know this is not always true, is that to not overemphasize the portfolio, because like me personally, I've never really shown my portfolio to anybody, but I know sometimes it can be the thing that either puts a person in your favor or says, nah, no, thank you. So if you have a really good portfolio and somebody does look at it, it could be the difference between getting an interview and potentially not getting an interview. Because I've definitely seen people's portfolios that I'm like, oof, I was on the fence and now I'm not going to move
it makes sense,
with this person at all.
Yeah, but that's what I emphasize to people. You don't, if you go on Google right now and you type React projects for portfolio, and let's say 10 pop up, those are the ones you don't want to do because everybody got them. Everybody's looking for those projects. So you want to do something different. And then the follow-up question that I get is, okay, so what I'm going to build? I tell people like, hey, write down 5 things that you're passionate about and build a project around that. If you like movies, build something around that. If you like crypto, build something around that. So again, I feel like a good project needs to have a unique touch, but you are also right. That doesn't necessarily mean that your success is going to come that way. that it doesn't necessarily means that your door is going to open because of your portfolio. That's why I like to say you have to do a little bit of everything in this market right now.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode, and I want to let you know that becoming a developer in 2025 is not going to look like becoming a developer in 2024. There is an overload of information, AI tools out there, so much conflicting social media BS that it's hard to understand what you really need to do. If you're interested in working with me and my partner Zubin in a very private, exclusive mentorship program where we teach you not just how to code, but how to reinvent yourself as a career changer and help you make a successful transition from your previous life into tech, we want to talk with you. This program is not easy, it is not short, but it is effective. If you want to schedule a talk directly with me or Zubin, just go to the show notes, parsity.io/inner-circle. Back to the show. Yeah, I like that approach in general. And Vanessa, I'm curious too, for you, how did you begin learning? So Wilfredo, sounds like you got like the Udemy course package, which is smart. I mean, the University of YouTube has legit knowledge. Vanessa, did you do a similar route?
Yeah, I feel like we were in a similar path. But first, I started with Code Academy because it's like the first thing that pops up. Yeah, yep. On the internet if you type in coding. But I got so bored with like the text style in learning because I'm like, okay, I want to see videos. So I went to the Udemy route. That's when I started getting tutorial hell though. So I wanted to break out of that. I love Udemy, but it's a lot of like watching. And when I found out about Scrimba, which is pretty amazing because you can interact with the video, you can like click on the video and then start typing in it. So that's when I feel like I got the most hands-on and really learned React. And I even took the advanced version of React. And I feel like Scrimba taught me how to do programming. But yeah, like same with Wilfredo, I also did a lot of projects on my own that's like not in the top 10. I found like a project that I was passionate about. At the time I was working in a lab, so I did something lab related. So, when an employer would ask about a project that they saw in my resume, they'll ask, oh, why did you build this? And I would say, it's because I wanted to solve this kind of issue. And so this is what I came up with. So I totally agree with Wilfredo about creating a project that you're really passionate about because, you know, everyone has a calculator or like a weather app. But what really stands out is if it's a project that's totally unique and different.
I feel like those projects no longer work in this market. Like you need to, even if you build something that you let's say in the JavaScript ecosystem, like if you build something with Node in the backend that communicates with the client with React or Angular or whatever, I think those kind of projects are like the new standard when it comes to trying to break into tech with, you know, like minimum to none experience.
And do you mean like full stack in general, like making a full stack project as opposed to?
It's a plus. Having that knowledge and being able to present that, not necessarily like a full stack project per se, but you know, just having at least one that you interact with the back end and the front end, and you have that synergy going on. That is something nice to have on your portfolio.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that one. I'm mostly front end, and I've done full stack work for most of my career, but I do think that there is at least what appears to be a major push to get people into full stack. And I don't think that means like you're like really equally good at back end as front end, because I'm certainly not. But it means that you can at least go to the back end, because now I see that most jobs, even if they're like really just front end jobs, they say full stack, which I think is an interesting trend that I've noticed over the last few years. I want to ask this because I know that you both talk to tons of people that are like a couple steps behind you. And I do too. I talk to a lot of people that want to get into tech and they're learning. And you two are like really close to that stage where you just came out of it. What are some mistakes that you hear from people as they're trying to learn? And what are some mistakes that you made in the past that you now see, oh man, I wish I hadn't done that, or oh no, that thing was a common mistake that I made?
Yeah. I think something that I see, and again, this is just my opinion. Don't kill the messenger, right? I see a lot of people talking about coding, but they don't show any code. So what is your credibility? Like you need to show that you can walk the walk and talk the talk. At some point, you need to add that credibility. I can talk all day, all week about how stressful it is to learn, or the mental challenge about changing careers and all that. But at some point, you need those. You need to show code. You need to show that you are solving problems, because in my opinion, that's how you're gonna get like a potential referral or somebody gonna recommend you to a position if you're trying to do the networking game. Because if I see somebody that is always posting about how stressful it is to change careers, but I never see code, that's somebody that I'm not recommending to my company, for example, because I don't know if this person is going to be reliable. And the last thing I want is to bring somebody to my team that can potentially not be a good fit. That's one thing that I see we Vanessa and we did that a lot. Like, again, we started learning around the same time. And I remember I got my job, and then like 45 days after, Vanessa got her job, which it was great.
That's really
And
cool. Yeah.
we did that a lot. Yes, we post about how stressful it was, but we also show a lot of code and a lot of challenges that we solve, things that we implemented in our projects. So we show that. So yeah. And as far as me, something that I wish I did, maybe taking more breaks. I was pushing it too hard. With my full-time job and the flexibility that I had at the time, I was pushing about 40 hours a week of studying. But I was, yes, I was pushing it too hard, and maybe I needed more breaks, because time is gonna pass no matter what, and there are certain things that you can control, like that jazz. You can market yourself with the best of your abilities. You can prepare yourself with the best of your abilities, but at the end of the day, that jazz, you don't control that jazz. You can do 90% of the work, but there is 10% that you don't control. So maybe I needed to take more breaks. That's what I would say to people. Like, make sure you rest, go for a walk, get that workout, go read, watch a movie, disconnect a little bit.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode, and if you're interested in becoming a software developer, learning how to build complex software, and actually get hired, join me at Parsity.io. If you're serious about joining, just schedule a call with me by clicking the link in the show notes below.
I agree with that. And also, like, especially when people get really frustrated with the application or job search process, they start venting on LinkedIn saying like, oh, like, my life sucks. And then that's it. Like, that's the post. It doesn't make me feel good to read it. Like, I can't really help you when all you do is vent. Like, it's okay for you to vent, but you should also write the good side of it. Like, you want to show that you're also doing something about it. Like, oh, okay, I got rejected by this company, but I think this is what happened and this is how I'll improve on it. Like, we want to see progress in it. Like, maybe positive kind of posts. That's something I like to see as content on LinkedIn, unfortunately.
100%.
That's what drives people to go to your LinkedIn. Like, they want to check up on you, not just see all these negative posts. I think that's one thing that a lot of people would tend to do on LinkedIn.
Oh man, I'm so glad that you both said that, because I feel weird telling people that too, but I totally agree. There was a dude at one point who was on LinkedIn. He got kind of LinkedIn famous. This is around like pandemic or pre-pandemic. And he like had a string of like rejections. Like, he was always getting rejected. And I'm like, there's no way, right? And this guy had like every post. And he got really like popular from writing these posts, which is great if you want to be LinkedIn famous. But eventually, like, he kind of just opened up that he was just basically unhireable at this point, because he got like famous for being rejected, and then like companies would read that and like, well, why would I want to like interview you now or take a chance on you? You know what I mean? And it was just, I don't think it's a good thing for your brand at all.
I agree with that.
Very good advice. Yeah. Which leads me to this job search part. I feel like everybody can learn to code, or not everybody. I like to use this analogy. Anybody can learn to code in the same way that anybody can get a six-pack, right? Like, with enough hard work, dedication, and persistence, it is physically possible to do that. And depending on where you start or your circumstances, it may take you way less time or way more time, depending on your starting point. But at some point, you can probably get it. Getting hired, though, is a whole other beast, because the skills acquisition piece is at least somewhat clear-cut. It's like, okay, I learned this thing. The market says that people do get hired and paid to do this skill. But now there's a big disconnect between learning the skill and somebody paying you to do the skill, how did you each approach getting hired after learning to code?
You mean like more like a application process, the reaching out process, right?
And even, I guess, even before that, like, so if you're coming from different backgrounds, like, let's say I'm a security guard or something like that. What do you do on your LinkedIn to tell people, I'm a software developer? Or do you change your LinkedIn? So what do you do to reinvent yourself? And then how do you go through the process?
So for me, I completely opened a new LinkedIn, and
Oh, smart.
yeah, so uh, that worked for me. So I opened a new one, just focused on technology and software engineering and the technologies that I was working on. Started it from scratch, and eventually I started getting connections, and I started meeting people like Vanessa and talking about our projects and stuff like that. So that was my approach, just starting from scratch, talking about trying to avoid. I told openly that I was a career change. I was changing careers, and I was coming from the healthcare and military before coding. But I kind of niched down to just software engineering in my personal brand on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what I did. And it worked out for me. I made great connections, and I have a lot of internet friends, let's say.
That's awesome. So you did a brand new LinkedIn, which it's actually a smart one. I don't recommend that enough, actually, because, like, why not? You could have more. I don't know if that's
Well, you
LinkedIn
just need an
legal,
email.
but
All you need is an
yeah, right. You just
email,
need
and
email.
that's it. Yeah.
That's actually a really smart. I don't know why I never thought about that. Yeah, you could just do that, especially if you're worried about your employer. Like Vanessa, you quit your job at that point, and you both have a medical kind of background, right? And I know a bit about your story, Vanessa, but can you share also, like, how you took that? How did you make that switch, like that public persona switch?
Oh yeah, that's interesting that Wilfredo created an entire LinkedIn profile. But for me, I kept my profile because I already had a lot of connections
Mm.
in the medical field. And I think the hardest part was trying to change my profile as a scientist into a software engineer. And that was like a hard switch. Like it was like a mental mind shift. Like, do
Mm-hmm.
I want people to see that I'm a scientist that does coding as a hobby, or do I want them to perceive me as a software engineer? And so that mind shift really changed the way I presented my LinkedIn. For example, I start hiding my old jobs and put it into like one bullet point, saying like, oh, I did this, my scientific background was done for like 10 years or something. And then above that are all new stuff that I've acquired through my internships or volunteer work. And over time, I started seeing like this analytics on like how you're found in LinkedIn. In the beginning, it used to be like clinical lab scientists, and nowadays it's for like software engineering. So that was my goal, was to be found as an engineer and not as a scientist. So I just had to change or bury some of my old parts just so I can focus on being a software engineer and not a scientist with a coding experience.
In my
I
case,
like
I
that.
bury everything, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's not a bad move either. Did,
Yeah.
did either of you get nervous, like, about like reinventing yourself? Like, oh, what do people think? What are my
It was
coworkers going to think? What are
honestly,
my
it was
friends going
fun.
to think?
Well, I didn't have many people from my past career on my new LinkedIn, but it was actually fun for me because I was so invested into changing careers that I was enjoying myself during the very beginning, trying like gaining new connections and
Mm.
talking to people in the industry. It was like really exciting for me.
It is true. It's like a
For
whole reset.
me,
You can be just
yeah,
change whoever you want.
for me, a lot of my old coworkers asked me about the career transition, and then they started asking like, "Oh, how can I do my own career transition? Oh, can I just do the certificate and I'll become like you?" I'm like,
Not quite.
sure. You have to add more grease into it to
Yeah,
make it
right.
work.
Man, that's funny. Yeah, that's cool that you both like had that mindset to do that, because it is a big reset button. You could just kind of reinvent. You're like, who's to say you can't? Like, you can be whoever you want to be on there. But I
It's
do know that is a
never too
big
late.
issue for people. Oh, no, not absolutely
Never
not.
too late.
It is funny that I hear people, the whole is it too late thing, which I think I
Yeah.
get it. I get that question because people want to know basically like, does ageism exist? Does sexism, do all these isms exist? And I'm like, yes, they all exist. But then what? Like, what are you going to do? Like, just not play the game? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, the game is still to be played, and as long as you're breathing. I mean, I've met people at 50, 60, I think is the oldest I've ever met that like that switched into
The
tech.
transition. Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is, of course, an anomaly. It's an interesting story. It's not the typical story. But if you're 30 or 40, I think, I don't know why, that wouldn't be much of a question to me at that age, because I'm like, there's so much more of your working life ahead of you, decades of your working life. Like, why end the game this early on in it? What do you all think about the freelance software title? Did you try that out? And that used to
I
be
haven't.
a path for people to do. Okay.
Yeah, I haven't tried that, so I can't speak too much about it.
What did you all put? Like, what did you all put at the top? Did you just keep your former title, or did you
Oh,
put something new in there?
I remember at the very beginning I put aspiring software engineer,
Okay.
and then I had that for about 10 months, and
Oh, wow.
when I felt like I was ready to start applying for jobs, then I changed it to software engineer.
Oh, okay. I like that. And Vanessa, what about you?
So I did freelance as my title when I was like in between like my career break and my official titles when I had the internship and volunteer work. I put myself as a freelance webmaster because I've been creating websites for organizations in the Bay Area, but as a volunteer thing. But I still want that to count because that's still like
For
within
sure.
creating websites. So that's why I said that's freelancing, freelance webmaster. And I still
Oh, that's a
keep
good
up
one.
with those websites. So if anyone wants to actually see them, like it's real, like I didn't make it up.
I think that's the important thing. Like, you actually did the thing. You actually were a freelancer, which is a valid title. I do think it's become a little overused than a few years ago. Like, I used to recommend people do that, and now I'm like, there's so many. But which is a good segue into doing some free work, like emphasis on the free part of freelancing. How did each of you find free work opportunities? Because even, as you probably know, even finding free work, it's kind of hard. Like, even giving away your services it can be a bit difficult. So how did you find people that were like willing to take a chance on you and let you code stuff
Yeah.
for them?
In my case, I didn't do free work per se, but I was invited to participate in small projects and contribute, and be part of a team, and that was great because I kind of learned for the first time how Git really works
Oh
and
yeah,
how to communicate, and we kind of did the whole Spring Agile thing, and that was a nice experience. But it was not kind of free work per se for a company or a team that was developing an MVP. It was just more like a small project for kind of I look at it like a learning experience.
Was it through a friend or how did you get invited?
It was through a friend though. A friend invited me to be part of a project, and I was doing like very small items, but they at the time they were huge because they were my first items. Even though that I was not getting paid, I was very grateful for that opportunity. But I was invited through a friend. Yeah.
And as for me, there were two ways that I found my opportunities. One is through my network. So I just talked to people like, how did you get into software engineering? How did you get your first job? And one of my friends actually told me about a volunteer organization called Hack for LA. I mentioned that before. So that's how I got that experience. But for the unpaid internship, I found it through the LinkedIn job post. So it just says unpaid internship. I was looking for some kind of unpaid or volunteer work just so I can stuff it in my resume. Like, because I was going for the mass application route. I don't think Wilfredo did, but I wanted to make a really good resume so I can just throw it everywhere.
Let's talk about that actually really quickly. The mass applying route for people out there that don't like, mass applying is what it sounds like. You apply to a ton of companies, and it used to be called like the pray and spray approach. And now all you hear about is people saying network, network, network. That's the only way to find a job. I believe both work because I've seen both ways work, but I don't often hear people talk about the reality that most people, in my opinion, do what you did, Vanessa, even though it might not be the most effective or whatever. But can you talk a little bit about your mass apply approach?
Yeah. For me, I kept an Excel sheet because I wanted to see how effective my resume is. So I wanted to see data. Yeah. So
that's really good.
I have multiple versions of my resume, and then I would throw it out for maybe like a couple of weeks or maybe a month. And then if I didn't get anything back, I change it to see if another way works. But I actually eventually hired a resume editor to give me a good feedback or change the way my resume was, especially when I had an internship and volunteer position. I wanted to make it look really strong. So after that resume, I had much higher ROI. So
Gotcha.
So I don't pray and spray with just one resume. I pray and spray at intervals and see like if I get something good back. But that was my method.
I like that method a lot. The data-driven approach, not just going off vibes, like seeing like, does this actually kind of work? And Wilfredo, what about you? Did you take I'm assuming you took a bit of a different approach.
I did. I didn't do the mass apply thing. Honestly, I was just applying to very specific roles with React. So anything that I kind of felt that I would be a good fit. And I know a lot of people kind of apply to everything. And again, that's not what I did at all. Actually, if I remember correctly, I applied to like about 130 jobs. That was it. And I often do this. These days, that's like almost not that many compared to other people that I read about. So yeah, I was applying to very specific roles where I felt like I could be a good fit, mainly with the front-end technologies that I was working and building projects with. And when it comes to my resume, of course, just like Vanessa, I didn't have, at least Vanessa was building some websites. I didn't have none of that. So for me, the approach that I took with my resume was just to talk about my projects. So lay down my projects and the problems that I solve during my projects. I completely left out my previous career job descriptions and bullet points. I just kind of talk a little bit about myself, my skills, soft skills, and I just kind of break down my main projects and problems that I solve while working on those projects.
I like that. That's also kind of what I did. I have a bit of a shady past, but also I just didn't have much work history for for a portion of my adult life. And so I just didn't put anything on there. And when people asked, I just said, it's not relevant. And I kind of got away with that. I was like, well, what I did before in the past was not really relevant, so I didn't add it here. And then people generally wouldn't really press me on it.
That's why.
And now there's so many years that no one cares anymore.
Yeah, that's why, because it was such a big shift, from healthcare to programming. I didn't want anything on my resume that could potentially not trigger an alert in somebody's AI programming model. Yeah. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I wanted to inject as many keywords as possible on that resume. And eventually, with the hope that eventually somebody will pick it up and give me like a pre-screening or an interview.
That's also smart. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, you don't want to it's confusing because even to a human, like when I would get people's resumes when I was hiring and I would read through them, and sometimes it'd be really difficult. I'm like, was this an accident that they sent me this? Because it would have nothing about software engineering, but it had a massive portion for their former life. And I'm like, okay, this person was like a scientist, let's say, or something like that. And they have this really long history. And then somewhere in between it would say software engineer, it would be really hard to determine what they were applying for. So, so now you both have made it to the promised land, which is kind of just step one. You did all the really hard stuff, and it's incredible. And that you did the self-taught route. And I'm always really impressed by people that can do that. And not only that, you're now working as software engineers, because a story that I hate to hear, and one that I have heard too many times, is people get into the industry and then they can't keep up, and then they lose the job that they tried so hard to get. And you both appear to be excelling. And Vanessa, especially, I follow you like anybody else should. And Wilfredo, I know we've interacted on LinkedIn. Another person you should be definitely following. But you've both managed to maintain your jobs, excel in them, and continue writing online. How were you or were you not prepared for the realities of software engineering as a profession?
The first few weeks was tough, I have to say. When you look at this huge code base and you had no idea where you're supposed to work on that code base, and let's say you got it, I don't know, the first few tickets I remember were very easy, kind of straightforward tickets, and not being able to even find where you need to work, or the writing style, because each team, each company, every person writes codes a little bit different. So you got to kind of get used to the style of the team, which is, in my case, was completely different to my approach and how I was learning how to write code. So the first few weeks, it was very overwhelming. Definitely imposter syndrome was at an all-time high. Even though that I kind of felt like, okay, I secured a job, I passed an interview, I proved to somebody that I can be the guy, the person that is is a good fit for that position. Imposter syndrome was at an all-time high for the first at least 4 weeks. It was honest. If I'm honest, it was pretty bad mentally, because you feel like you don't know anything about anything. It's like, where am I at? But with time, with time, things get a little easier and easier, and you get to the point that now you know the code base, like your palm, your hands, like you know where to go quick, and
I still go through that myself, but I'm glad you mentioned that. That's the reality. Like, you just feel like, what the hell? How did I get in here?
Yes.
Did I get lucky?
Yes. I remember telling a very good friend of mine, I'd be like, man, I'm not gonna make it through a month here. I don't get. I cannot find any component in this code base.
We've all been there.
It's so funny you mentioned that, because I felt like you were telling my story. Like, I felt the first few months I kept thinking to myself that they're gonna fire me because I don't know anything. Like, in the daily stand-ups, everyone would be saying some kind of technical word or part of the base that I have like no idea about, and I'm like, what am I doing here? Why'd you all trust me with your code base?
Yes. I'm very fortunate. Usually tech leads or director of development, they understand that it's going to take a while. For even senior developers that join the team during this time, it takes them a while just to get up to speed when it comes to the code base. But when you're new and this is your first job full time, and you're trying to make an impression, and you're trying to stand out and send that message that, hey, you did a great hiring me, is very stressful. At least for me, it was really bad in the first few weeks.
But for me, like, I start feeling better when I hear feedback from my supervisor, director, and even the CTO saying like, hey, you're doing good. And just hearing that from all three of them or people higher up just made me feel better. And that's when I feel like, okay, I'm going to keep my job because I worked very hard to get here.
Yes, man. So I just started a job about 5 months ago, and I felt that same way that you're both feeling. This is like my, I don't even know, 6th place or something I've worked at. And I just feel this way every single place. I've just come to accept it that I'm like, okay, I'm going to feel like an idiot for a month or 3. And then around the 90-day mark, I'll finally start feeling a little more like integrated into the environment and maybe feel like not such a dummy. But it's a rough deal. It is very emotional. It is. And because we switch jobs a lot as software engineers, it kind of happens more often than I think in other professions, where you're more likely to stay at a company for 10 years or 5 years. I mean, now I feel like the average tenure for a software engineer is like 2 years or something like that, which has its pros and cons, but maybe that's another episode. Before I let you both go, I'm curious, do you have any last words of advice for people out there who are in your position and are now trying to become software engineers?
I would say this everyone that started learning how to program with me during my time, like Vanessa, we started during the same time. Like 95% of them had jobs today because they never quit, and they kind of promoted themselves on LinkedIn or in other social medias. I'm pretty sure professional networks. But they never quit. They just show up every day. They show code, often, and they talk about the problems they solve. So I would say me, I have my background is in healthcare, and before that, it was logistics in the military. I didn't know anything about programming at all. I didn't even know how to get Hello World in the console, to be honest with you, 3 years ago. And today, I'm a professional software engineer. So definitely, every frustration, every time that I felt like quitting, because you really think about it. Like sometimes you feel
Oh
like,
yeah.
man, should I quit this? But yeah, it's fine. You cannot control your thoughts. But you're not gonna quit just because you had that thought. So, stay in the game, and eventually that is gonna open for you.
Love that.
And for me, try not to put yourself in some kind of like strict timeline. I know, like maybe pre 2020 or pre pandemic, people get their first job within 6 months after like coding boot camps. But nowadays, it can take 1 year or 2 years or even more. Like it's unpredictable. So
Hmm.
it getting into or breaking into tech might take longer than you think. So you just need that grit to just keep going. Like Wilfredo said, like people who got the jobs are the ones who didn't quit.
I often look for the single factor after all these years working with so many people, and I'm trying to think, what is the one thing? And you both mentioned it. It is honestly, as corny as it sounds, it's consistency, and it ends up being grit. Like who can hold on the longest and keep going even in the face of adversity or when it looks like this is not going to work out. If you can keep going, a lot of times, even when I discount things like skill level or education, and I think, what is it about these people that have them get to the finish line? And a lot of times that is it. They just were super consistent. I know you
Yeah.
both are online and write a lot of great advice for people, which I find incredible. Especially, I know how difficult it is to try to juggle, not only being a software engineer, but like showing up online and writing and then meeting with people, especially when you're newer. I know Vanessa, like you started your job, what, about a year ago or so?
Yep, it's like a year and 7 months now, which is crazy.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That's actually, time flies. Geez, that is wild.
Yes.
That is, it's longer than I thought. But a lot of people, they drop off the face of the earth when they get the job. They say, okay, got the job, see ya. And you never hear about them online. You two are still out there writing. Where can people connect with you? What is the best place for people to follow you and chat with you?
For me, it would be LinkedIn. I'm pretty active, although I don't post every day, but I do comment on people's posts often, and I talk to a lot of people on DMs. So that would be a great way to communicate with me. And I do like to give back to the community because when I started learning, a lot of people kind of gave me advices for free, no expecting anything back, and I really appreciate that. So I do have some coffee chats sometimes, and that's just my way to express my gratitude to the industry, to the community. So I'm happy to talk to anybody.
Right. I agree with that. Like, I also stayed on LinkedIn after getting my job because I want to give back to, because a lot of people that I networked, they gave me their experience and advice all for free, not asking for anything back. But obviously everyone can find me on LinkedIn. I try to be as active as possible and share free resources whenever I can.
You do an amazing job at that. Yeah, definitely people that you should be following. And I'll have their contact information in the show notes as well. I can't thank you both enough for first offering to do this and then giving out really good, solid, practical advice for people. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having
Yeah,
me.
it's been great. Thank you.
That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. If you're serious about switching careers and becoming a software developer and building complex software and want to work directly with me and my team, go to parsity.io. And if you want more information, feel free to schedule a chat by just clicking the link in the show notes. See you next week.